For today's meditation, we are reading from 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 1 to 9. Then David came to Nob to Ahimelech the priest. And Ahimelech came to meet David trembling and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" And David said to Ahimelech the priest, "The king has charged me with a matter and said to me, 'Let no one know anything of the matter about which I sent you, and with which I have charged you. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever is here." And the priest answered David, "I have no common bread on hand, but there is holy bread, if the young men have kept themselves from women." And David answered the priest, "Truly women have been kept from us, as always when I go on an expedition. The vessels of the young men are holy, even when it is an ordinary journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord, to be replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg, the Edomite, the chief of Saul's herdsmen. Then David said to Ahimelech, "Then have you not here a spear or a sword at hand? For I brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste." And the priest said, "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah. Behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it, for there is none but that here." And David said, "There is none like that. Give it to me." Saul's irrational hatred of David led to the beginning of a life of wandering for the latter as he fled from the king. Many of these experiences deeply impacted him, and he later penned beautiful psalms about them. One of these unforgettable moments occurs here. David, the anointed of the Lord, goes to the priest, also the anointed of the Lord. However, David is in full flight from the king of the land. Ahimelech, the priest, instinctively realizes that something has gone wrong. Yet Ahimelech was a man in touch with God. He recognized the role of David in the affairs of the kingdom, his faithfulness in fighting against the enemies of Israel, his utter loyalty to Saul, and his place of honor in the king's house as well as in the land. In fact, David was in charge of Saul's protection as well. He had a healthy respect to David, and when he unexpectedly showed up without the entourage, he was afraid and came to meet David trembling and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" But David meets his frightened inquiry with a lie. He claims that he is on a top secret and very urgent mission for Saul, and that he has arranged to meet his men elsewhere to maintain secrecy. Due to the haste of their departure, he and his men are supposed to have set out without even arranging for food or weapons. Ahimelech says there is no bread except the showbread. The showbread was not to be treated casually. In fact, it was to be eaten by the priests, and it shall be for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in a holy place, as we read in Leviticus chapter 24, verse 9. This passage in Leviticus establishes the principle that it must be regarded as holy. However, Ahimelech gave it to David, only ensuring that he and his men were at least ceremonially clean. In giving David the bread, Ahimelech broke with priestly custom, but not with God's word. He rightly understood that human need was more important than any religious observance. When Jesus' disciples were criticized for breaking religious Sabbath custom, Jesus used that what Ahimelech did to explain the matter in Matthew chapter 12, verse 1 to 8. Jesus approved of what Ahimelech did, and and honored him by standing on Ahimelech's same ground. When the Pharisees accused his disciples of plucking heads of grain to eat on the Sabbath day, he refers to this incident. In time of need, the law of God demanded mercy rather than ceremonial strictness. There is no law against doing good. He concluded his conversation with the Pharisees saying, "And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath." Ahimelech gave him the sword of Goliath in addition to the showbread that had been removed earlier from the presence of the Lord to be replaced by fresh bread. When questioned by Saul about his actions, Ahimelech rightfully asked, "And who among all your servants is so faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law and captain over your bodyguard and honored in your house? Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? No, let not the king impute anything to his servant or to all the house of my father, for your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little." David lied to the good man to save his own life. How David later regretted this when Saul killed Ahimelech and all his household, 70 in all, for helping David. He said to Abiathar, the only one of Ahimelech's son to survive the massacre, "I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house." Yet Ahimelech has found eternal favor and honor in the sight of the Lord, while Saul, who killed him, gained everlasting notoriety. He who loses his life for God's sake will save it to life everlasting. David sought refuge with the king of the Philistine, Achish. Here too he was reduced to feigning madness before him once the Philistine commanders realized who he was. He later wrote Psalm 56, reflecting upon this incident. The title of that psalm identified as a song he wrote when the Philistines captured him in Gath. Apparently, though, in 1 Samuel 21 doesn't detail it, the Philistines captured David when he came to Gath. He muses on their incessant suspicion and hounding of him, though he was innocent of any evil motive. David thought he could find anonymity or sympathy among the ungodly Philistines in Gath, but he was wrong. Psalm 56 describes David's journey from fear to praise as a prisoner in Gath. He says, "When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me?" He retraced his trust in God in verse 10. "In God, whose word I praise, in the Lord, whose word I praise. In God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can man do for me? I must perform my vows to you, O God. I will render thank offerings to you, for you have delivered my soul from death. Yes, my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of life." Like all of us, David falters in lying for the fear of his life or depending on the protection of the Philistine king. But he quickly realizes the great truth, that it is not his scheming or planning or the power of Achish, but only the Lord who will protect him from his enemies. It is a good place to come and say, "In God I trust." Let us keep our hearts from lying to save ourselves. Let us be courageous like Ahimelech the martyr, who stood for the truth. Let us put our trust in God and Him alone in the midst of great extremities, like David and like Ahimelech. He is more than able to fulfill His word and to bring about His purposes for us and to accomplish His will in us. God bless.